Welcome everyone to this overview of the WLS Digital Resources for 2022. I do have a set of slides and I will share those with you after the session, along with a link to the recording. Those session slides are also in a presentation format on the IT Wiki, and I'll be making sure that that's updated by the end of the week. And so you'll have all those resources. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you so that we can talk about, so we can get started. All right. We are going to be talking about an overview. So we'll talk about all of the different resources that there are very briefly, and some alternate resources for longer get for our patrons. The key change, we no longer subscribe to and those changes were made based on the popularity of alternate resource, additional resources within the things we already have, and based on patron interest and basis. So another key change, and I'll talk about these in depth, is our changes to Overdrive, audiobooks, magazines, and there is a link to Canopy within the Libby app. They are working on improved accessibility features. We'll talk a little bit more about what those are. And the biggest change for what's coming up will be that the Overdrive app is going to be sunsetted and is being sunsetted. I'm hearing a little bit of background noise. So if you are not speaking, if you could mute yourself, that would be really appreciated. All right, so as an resources into e-content, e-learning, and e-research. This sort of overview of the different resources that we have, these are the resources that you will find on the WLS Listen, Read, and Watch page. For many of you, I know that you have links either to that page or to the resources on your own websites for patrons. So along with Overdrive, which I'm going to spend more time talking about because it is the most popular and most used resource that we have. And so we'll talk about that. We also have Hoopla. I'll talk a little bit more about that. Overdrive, I think most of us are most familiar with it. It's really good for popular fiction and nonfiction. They've added magazines, as I mentioned earlier, along with the RB Digital audiobooks. So they've increased their content. And as I already mentioned, and I'll probably mention it a couple more times, at least during the session, is that the Overdrive app will be discontinued by the end of 2022. We'll talk about the timeline for that. Hoopla's one of Hoopla's big assets is that items are always available. It has fiction, nonfiction, audiobooks, movies, graphic novels, as does Overdrive, music, TV series, and there's we'll talk about the particulars of some of the content a little further along, but you can see here, this is just sort of an overview of what is in each of the resources. There are, the Hoopla Kids option is within the app or within the website. It is really good to know that the Hoopla Kids mode is really available. I'll take a look at that in shortly, but it's not password protected. So an adult can set up kids mode, but it could be disabled by a child who was savvy, as they sometimes are. So Comics Plus is an asset that has gained a lot of different titles and publishers during 2021. You can browse it by age, and there are previews available for some of the for all of the different resources. We've got Canopy, which is video, foreign, indie, classic, documentary. It has the great courses. It also has some learning and education resources, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. The Okay, and somebody pointed out that Hoopla, excuse me, Hoopla is only on Kindle Fire, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about that in a bit. The Kindle apps are going to be less available on a lot of the other, for other resources as well. So if a person has a Kindle Fire, they'll be able to use the Kindle, use things through Kindle because it's a tablet, but the e-reader kind of options are going to be less and less available over time. Reading is still available. That is the resource from Library Ideas. They have fiction and nonfiction, Lonely Planet travel guides. They have some multi-language juvenile titles, and SparkNotes are there. So that's a good place to go for those. And Tumble Books is also available. It's animated storybooks for children. It has puzzles and quizzes and videos. And so it can be interactive. So that can be really helpful. We'll talk about, as I said, some more of these in depth a little further along. The borrowing models, it's important to know this in many cases because your patrons may have questions. Overdrive is those in as though there are physical items. So you can have place holds on things. There are a little bit of variation on that. We'll talk about that a little bit more. One of the big assets for their magazines options are that checkouts count. And so patrons can read as many magazines as they want. It's not, and it doesn't add to what they have checked out, are always available, and they are a separate kind of lending model. Hoopla is, as I said, it's per month. The loan periods vary by format. And so if you get a music CD or a music option, it is 7 days. If you have an ebook, it's longer. It works. Patrons get 10 credits per month. And so they can, and those are re-upped at the beginning of every month. Patrons who are set up to get notifications will get reminders about whether or not they have used all of their before the end of the month. So they can actually, that could be something that we can help to remind them of as well, so that they can know that they're getting the most use that they can out of that. There are similar models, lending models for both Hoopla Kids and Comics Plus and Can Screen, that there are the number of credits varies per resource. And many of these credit amounts were upped when the pandemic came and everyone was moving toward digital resources. And there are, and so I think that we will probably maintain those depending on the budget distribution that's chosen by the PLDA e-content committee. There are, Reading has 12 checkouts per week, as you can see. So there, it really is, a person can use a lot of the resources. And then Tumble Books is Read Canopy, which is streaming only. And the other resources, Overdrive, Hoopla, Hoopla Kids, and Reading, and I believe Comics Plus, can all be downloaded for the length of the loan of the item. There's a question in the Hoopla and Reading on a Kindle. Those are, there won't be particular apps for those. You can access those, I believe, and I'll make a note to confirm this in the follow-up email, but you can access those on a Kindle in your Kindle browser. It's going to be interesting. We'll talk a little bit more releases to Overdrive and what that means for, and the amount of information that they have available about the changes. All right. So the big news, I started out with Overdrive because I think that these are really important changes, because Overdrive and Libby is our most important or our most used resource. Because of that, we want to make sure that our staff and our libraries are keeping up with those changes. In October of 2020, Overdrive bought RB Digital, and they incorporated the RB Digital collection into the Overdrive collection. So there is no more RB Digital, and it just means that Overdrive increased their what they have available in audiobooks for Overdrive patrons. Overdrive has been doing a lot of purchasing and acquisitions kinds of things. It's what has made magazines, and they're also linking to Canopy in the Libby app. They purchased Canopy, but they aren't integrating the content into their collections yet. But for now, there's a link in the Libby app, and we'll take a look at that in just a moment. I'm going to, I have a couple of live things I want to do so you can see those options. I want to sort of get a little bit of feedback from you guys first about what you use and about what your libraries have available. So I have our poll first. I'm going to put this up on the screen in a moment. But the question is, does your library website have RB Digital links or mentions on it? So let me go ahead and get my poll up here. And then if you would, you can go ahead and I'm going to launch the poll. All right, and I'm getting a little bit of information that I'm fading out. Is that any better now, or does it continue to fade? Let's see if I can make any changes here. Okay, it is better. All right, great. Thanks. So, oops, excuse me. All right, so I'm going to launch the poll. And the question is, does your library website have RB Digital links or mentions? Yes, no, or I'm not sure. So if you are not sure, or if you want to take a moment now to double check your website, you can go ahead and do that. I'll put leave the poll open for just a little bit more time so that people have a chance to answer. And maybe even do a little checking, because since RB Digital does not is no longer a separate service, you'll want to make sure that your website, whether you are responsible or you want to talk to somebody at your library about updating to make sure that those are no longer there. We can kind of get patrons pointed in the right direction. So we have about half of the people, 60% of people have answered the question. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And it looks like the majority of our libraries, 75% of our libraries have taken all of the references to RB Digital off their websites. So if you are not sure, you'll want to take a look at that and see, and if it's still on your website or you're not sure and it turns out that it is there, you'll want to make sure that you kind of get that updated. All right, so let's take a look at some of the other Overdrive news. Libby, largely because Overdrive is focusing on the Libby app, they're really working to improve their accessibility features. They're partnering with a website and an organization called Fable. They're doing a lot of user testing of the Libby app to make sure that it is accessible to blind and low vision users. So I think most of us are aware that we've always had options in Libby for changing the size of type, the font itself, the color and contrast, and that kind of thing. But they're doing even more user experience improvements. So it will include things like screen reader and voice control improvements. I'm not sure if anyone uses those features or has worked with patrons who have. If you have, it would be great to add that in the chat. Some of you may have heard me talk about when the very first time I went to NYLA, I attended a session where a young man demonstrated, he had low vision, and he demonstrated his screen reader. And it really made an impact on me because I think about, guys, it made me think about how easily I can use so many of the resources, and how we can really do a lot to make things available to people through some pretty oftentimes detailed but important kinds of changes we can make. So they're working, Overdrive is working on Libby behind the scenes to improve the screen reader and voice controls, to provide new accessibility options. The idea with full screen menus is that rather than something just saying click here, for someone who is not actually reading that on the screen, they don't know what here is. So there'll be fuller screen menus. And then when they talk about the updated menu icon, in the middle of the bottom of the screen, currently there's a little Libby icon. And they'll be changing that to a 3-bar icon that is the far more familiar and more widely used icon for a menu across web resources. So they're moving that in line with what's familiar and what the typical icons are, so that it is easier to use. If you want more information about the accessibility features, there's a link here to that, and it will go to the Libby Help. We'll be looking at the Libby Help in a bit, because in addition to those helps a couple times already, is that the Overdrive app will be sunsetted during 2022. So next month in February, they will be removing the app, the Overdrive app, from the Apple App Store, from Google Play, and the Microsoft Store. So it will no longer be available for new installations. People who currently use it will still be able to use it through 2022. But by the end of 2022, they really will be closing Overdrive, so that all of your patrons have to be migrated to Libby. This is going to allow them to focus on one product and not have to maintain two. I have a poll here we're going to talk about that I'm going to put up in a moment. If you think about maintaining different collections, currently there's Libby on iOS, Libby on Android. The Overdrive can be on iOS or Android or the desktop. So, and the Libby app can also be used in a browser. So maintaining all of that actually slows down development and improvements on just one app. So they are going to be moving forward with that. I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll so that you can, I kind of want to just get a sense for what you use and what you use in terms of Overdrive content. So let me go ahead and I'm going to launch the poll. We'll give you guys a moment to answer. You've got some choices here, and I guess I did not put an option in here for I don't use Libby at all, or I don't use the Overdrive options at all. I don't use digital resources. I didn't put any of those on there. If you're not a user, then you might want to go ahead and answer for your patrons. That kind of thing, as you know, if that's an option for you, you can kind of answer for your patrons if you're not a user yourself. So there's a question in the chat about having to merge. Do you have to merge old and new card numbers for Canopy like you do for Overdrive and Libby? As far as I know, you do not have to do that, because access to Canopy as well as Hoopla are email based. So that makes that happen behind the scenes. If there's something like that where a patron has any issues with that, the Canopy and Hoopla support team usually will take care of that if they're contacted directly. All right. And it is a good reminder, since that question was asked, that when a patron gets a new card, before as soon as possible after they get a new card, you have two options. One of them is for the overdrive, if there's someone at your library who uses Overdrive Marketplace, they can contact Overdrive to have the new card and the old card merged. Or you can send a help desk request to support at wlsmail.org, and we can make that merge happen. The reason you want to do it as soon as possible is so that the patron is not placing holds or checking things out on both cards, because then things get messy. So the sooner you can take care of that, the better off you are. So it looks like I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results. So we had 75% of people answered, and the 60% of people use Libby on iOS. More 28% of people use Libby on Android, and then there are 12% of people still use Overdrive, so either on desktop or iOS. I think the biggest change here, and the people that the patrons we're going to need to work with most, are those who are using Overdrive on their desktops, because I think that oftentimes they are not mobile device users, or less so, and smart device users, so they may need the most help moving and making the change. So we do have so there are some resources, and for the transition, there's actually an Overdrive webinar coming up soon. Let me go ahead and just sort of open that link. There is this webinar coming up in February 2nd. And so as they wind things down with the Overdrive app, this webinar will have a lot of information, or more information. They'll be presenting that. And so if you have the time to watch this or attend, or you want to attend and get register to get the recording, if it doesn't suit your schedule, this might be a really good asset for you to take a look at. I'm looking forward to that webinar for sure, to try to get some more details. So their question is in the chat: what if a patron, like me, has two library cards from different systems? This isn't a problem with Cloud Library. How does it work with Libby? In Libby, you can also add two cards to your Libby app, and then you choose which card you want to use when you go to check something out. So it also works and is very easy to add extra cards. One of the other things that they made really easy to do is to sync your Libby app across devices. So if somebody has Libby on their iPhone and they want to add it to their iPad, when they add it to their iPad, there's an option to look for the previous installation, and then it will sync it with a code. It gives you a code with a certain amount of time to do that sync, and as long as you do that, it'll stay synced across the app will stay synced across your devices. And it works iOS to Android and Android to iOS, so there's no it's seamless in both those ways. So there's a question: will patrons still be able to read Libby books in their browser on a computer? And I believe that yes, they will be able to, because there are users, they know that there are users who won't have the app on a mobile device, so they'll make that available. The downside will be that if they're on their browser, they won't be able to download it, so they'll have to be connected to Wi-Fi. It's a streaming situation, so they'll have to be connected to Wi-Fi in order to do that and to read books in Libby on their browser. In addition to that transitioning to Libby webinar, the Overdrive staff training page, I'm going to kind of skip down to here, which includes some webinars and on-demand webinars that they've recorded, something like how to train your community on Libby. Those are all on the Overdrive staff training page, and they have really done a lot of this that are for staff training, in addition to upcoming webinars like that transitioning option. And there's a version of the how to train your community on Libby that's coming up soon. Actually, that's today, that's right now. So if you're here, you're not there. But there is information about curating your digital collection. And then there are also some other options here about transitioning to Libby. So that's where you'll find upcoming webinars. They have lots of their recordings of their on-demand webinars. If you miss one, there's some really great basics getting started with Libby. These are meant for staff. They have other how-to videos, and some are for you to actually share with patrons. So there are some really, they're very detailed, some about signing in, some about search, some about just ebooks or audiobooks using the Kindle. So these can be really helpful. There are lots of other options here for the Overdrive help. And then they also put together these training kits. So these will be kits that you can use with the library. So you can have the library staff. A lot of times you can see the kit contains a presentation, a demonstration, follow-up PDFs. There's a whole lot of content here so that you can actually put things together to share with your colleagues so that everybody is up to speed. There's a kit about managing holds, or some things for multilingual, multilingual options there as well. And then for people who are working behind the scenes, there's some options for curating tips. And you can see there's a whole bunch of other, the other thing that might be helpful to you is an infographic kit about the lending models. I'm going to talk a little bit more about one of the things that makes it a little bit more difficult for patrons in the way that we have things set up. And that is, so there are, as I said, the Libby model or the Overdrive model it works like a physical a month, or I'm sorry, 10 checkouts simultaneously. They can have 10 holds. Items are 7-day defaults, but the patron can go into their settings and change that default to 14 days if they would like to do that. Magazines, as I said earlier, don't count as checkouts. A patron can hide their history. That history is kept by default. The patron can't turn it off as a group. They can't just say, no, I don't want my history kept. They can remove individual titles from the history, or they can hide it so they don't see it. And that can be done in their setting as well. There's a discussion about changing the default from 7 days to 2 weeks. And as far as I know, there is not. I don't think that is a local decision that we can make. I think that's an Overdrive decision. But I will do a little bit of checking, and we'll see if we can find that out. All right. Yes, and it is true. I think for those of you, I'm going to just take a moment here and open a new tab. As I mentioned earlier, on the Westchester Library site, a lot of what we're looking at right now is on this Listen, Read, and Watch tab. We have Overdrive listed here because it is the most used, but if you go to the entire list that's on the tab, you'll see that all of the options are here. It shows you if something requires a library card or not. And so if we go to Overdrive here. If someone does want to manage their settings, they can log in to their account. I'm signed in now. And so they can see their loans, their holds, their wish list. If they have rated any titles or they can also make recommendations, and there's a limited number per year. Those recommendations go display to the libraries who that patron belongs to in Marketplace, and the library can decide whether or not they're going to purchase that title. We'll take a look at the history in just a moment, but we'll take a look at the settings for now. So in the settings, a patron can choose the defaults for their lending periods. So if you are working with a new patron who's just getting set up, this might be a good thing for you to mention right away, that they can change this and maybe even help them to change their defaults to the longer time periods for ebooks, for audiobooks, for magazines, and then 7 days for videos. So because the defaults are usually shorter, but this is a good option for them to be able to change and set up on their own. This is also where someone can choose to hide their history from themselves, but they're hiding it from themselves. It's still visible in the background, it's still in the background being kept. So the question is, do these overdrive settings carry over to Libby? And the answer is yes, they do. So I'm gonna, if we have a moment, I will see if, and we're gonna connect up to the live Libby display, and we'll see if we can look at that, how to make those changes in Libby. You can see that there are options for audience. If someone is a Kindle user, they can set that up so that they only see Kindle books when they're as an option for when they borrow. And then there are some display options here as well. I wanted to mention the loans and because this is where somebody, if they have things checked out, it will display in their loan list. So, and it'll always show them how many more titles they can borrow. They're really doing a big push to get people to use Libby. And so there'll be messages all over the website for people who are used to using the website, and in order to sort of encourage them to go to Libby. I have a list of holds here. I can put those on, and we'll talk a little bit about that. When holds come up now, they can actually go to a different email. They can edit the hold. A person can remove a hold. And there's an option now called Deliver Later. If someone's not ready to accept a hold, it will automatically be suspended, as it were, for 7 days, and then they'll be offered it again. If they don't check it out within the 3 days of their of the hold period, like waiting on the hold shelf kind of period, then their hold is canceled. But it does give people another option for some of the to be able to keep track of and get to check out those holds that they might not be ready for. A person can create a wish list. They can rate titles. The recommendations, if they have made any, are listed here. If they haven't made any, this will be just empty, and there's information here about how to recommend titles. It's a good thing, I think, for patrons who some patrons use the recommend option a lot. And I think there are not that many patrons who do it, but for those who do, they're used to doing it, and they do it on a regular basis. The history link is here, and it shows you, it gives you information about your history. you can see that it is, it's here. If I actually want to remove something from my list, I have to do that manually. So I can use the 3-dot menu to remove it from the history, but I can only do that individually. All right. Let's come back here to, so we talked a little bit about that. Kindle titles for now are still using that Libby app and the Overdrive app, but they will be, as the other, as Overdrive is sunsetted, more of those things will be done actually in the Kindle browser. I'm looking forward to getting more details about that at the February 2nd, workshop from Overdrive. I think that oftentimes when you're working with patrons, you can either, you can do that on the website, and for people who sometimes that's an easier way to do that, but for as we move people to Libby, we're going to probably want to work more often in the Libby app directly. And I'm going to just connect up here shortly, and we'll see if we can get connected up so we can look at Libby directly live. All right. We sort of talked about all of these options that you can renew if no one's waiting. When someone borrows something, they do have the option to read it in Kindle or to download it, It depends on how they want to do that. So if they are a Kindle user and they click on Read Now with Kindle, it'll take them to their Amazon account. If they're logged in, it'll take them right to a page where they choose what device they want to download it to. If they are not logged in, it takes them to their Amazon login, and then from there to that page to transfer to their Kindle device. So, and somebody just put in the chat that they tried to change the Libby loan period and got these instructions. You can change a book's loan period when you borrow it. And so it's those setting those defaults, it sounds like, are not yet in Libby. My understanding is that they're making changes and improvements to and expanding the settings that are going to be available for changing in Libby. So we'll keep a lookout for that one. All right. So let me take a second here before we, well, as we're talking about the Overdrive mobile apps, Libby is available for iOS, Android, and Windows 10 Plus. You can set up one or more cards on the Libby app, and the Overdrive app is being sunsetted, as I've said a bunch of times. The other app that's available is Sora, and it's for students. If their school is partnered with Overdrive to use the Sora app, if people have questions about the Sora app, or if you have questions about it, every school has a representative, an Overdrive representative. So if you have questions about the Sora app, Overdrive asks that you contact your school and go through it, get answers to Sora through the school that you're connected to. So I'm going to take, I have a screenshot of the Libby app here. And so I'm going to see if, let's see if I can pause my sharing for just a second. And I'm going to see if we can get my, all right. It's just going to take a moment here. Well, all right. I'm having a little trouble connecting my Libby app, so if we have some time at the end, we'll come back to that. My apologies for that technical difficulty. There are, for those of you who are already Libby users, you are familiar with the basic screens. A person can search, they can browse the front screen. It will, there'll be links there to different categories of titles, and they have pushed magazines to the top there. So you can also, so you can browse, you can search. There'll be a link to your card in the app, and then the Libby icon here, which is going to be replaced by that 3-bar menu, will take you to your settings, your information about your history, all of that sort of thing. And you also can get notifications in that Libby icon. It'll tell you what you have on hold, what has just hold's been filled, if you have a book that is about to be due, so you can finish reading it, and then you can go ahead and it'll let you know that your loan is coming to an end. The icon here is your bookshelf, so that'll show you what you have checked out, and it's where your history will be. So and there is Marcy put a note in the chat that New York State residents can get library cards from Queens Public Library, Brooklyn Public Library, and New York Public Library and connect them to the Libby app. So if your patrons want more items, then they can get through the WLS system, then they can also sign up for those additional cards and put those into their Libby app. Libby search is a keyword search. You can limit before getting results, or you can limit after. If in a search result option, there are 2 ways you can filter. If you refine the results, it's going to limit just that search. So if results come back and you have audiobooks and ebooks, you can refine it so it's just ebooks. There's also an option to set preferences, and if you set the preference, that'll stick. So all of your subsequent searches would be for ebooks if you chose that and set that in your preferences. The Libby shelf shows your current checkouts, recent checkouts, so you can renew them, as well as since your checkouts are there, you can open them, download them, return them, renew them, and tag them. And I'll talk about tagging a little bit more in a bit. Your holds are there, and you can see that this is where it tells you the expected wait time. It gives a patron an option to suspend or cancel the hold. And then it's good to know that because some libraries purchase in the WLS system, purchase always available titles, a patron may try to borrow an item. It says it's available, but they will be prompted to place a hold. This happens on popular titles fairly often because the libraries that purchase always available titles often do that on popular titles. So you may, patrons may ask about that, and it just means that they have to, they do have to place a hold on something. We've talked to Overdrive about that, and somehow this functionality is really deeply embedded in their software. So it's they are aware that that is not ideal. But I think it's a big change for them to be able to resolve this issue with the way that their database is put together. So I don't expect a resolution to this particular issue in the very near future. We'll keep tabs on that for you. Libby tags allow you to organize, download, and share titles. There are smart tags for things like recently borrowed or the next issue of something. So if I tag a magazine, it'll let me know when the next issue is available. And I can see a list of what those are going to be. You can also create custom tags. This is a really good way for us to be able to create collections or book lists or audiobook lists and share them with patrons. They can be shared as HTML files or downloaded as spreadsheet files. And so you would be able to tag a bunch of titles in Libby and then share them on your website, on your Facebook page, however that would be. And so it could be a topical thing so that you could have something that goes with the program or that kind of thing. All right, so let's talk about Hoopla. We already mentioned that it is multiple formats: ebooks, audiobooks, music, streaming video. There are items are always available, and it's 10 items per month. The Hoopla, one of the I think downsides to Hoopla is that you have to create an account and sign in to browse the catalog. So a patron cannot see what's available without doing that. If they're using Overdrive, they don't have to sign in until they're ready to check something out or put it on hold. They can browse. They can browse without signing in, but in Hoopla, they do need to sign in to see that. Hoopla has actually also added magazines recently, and I don't have an image of it here, but there's now a more icon in the bottom of the app, at the bottom of the app that says more, and it will open a screen that shows magazines that are available for patrons to read. Canopy is streaming only, and it is available on a lot of different devices. Roku and iOS and Android, Apple TV and Chromecast, they are actually expanding that all the time. One of the new features of Canopy is that they have made trailers available on the desktop. It's not on all of the videos, but it's on many of the popular videos. So it's like a 3-minute trailer. So you get to try before you buy. And then they're going to be adding that to the app. My understanding is in the coming year. So this year at some point, trailers will be available in the app as well. There are, and there was the comment that Hoopla is also available via Roku. So that thanks for that added information. Hoopla has done a bunch of work to make their resources available for people who are listening in their cars with audiobooks and that kind of thing. And so they are linking up with other services to expand the audience that can use them. The content I have some getting started options here. Oftentimes, I think for some patrons who are used to using a desktop, if they set up their account on a desktop computer first and then get it all set up, they sign in with their library card number and PIN, they enter their name and email address and password, verify their email, and then go to their mobile device and download it. Sometimes it's easier for them to just install, download, install, and then log in. They don't have to set up their account on the app as well. I think sometimes for people who have vision issues, that also can be easier to do on a desktop before they go to the app. Some of the options, and I kind of wanted to take a look at some of the Canopy options here, just very briefly. I'm going to pull this back and we'll go back to the WLS site, because there are lots of Canopy options that are both in addition to the training, in addition to classics and foreign films and indie films, they have West Side Story. This is only available for a short amount of time, so that's something you could certainly share with your patrons. But in the browse in the browse option, you can see that in addition to movies and arts films, and those are some of the films, arts films are films that are considered they are maybe not your usual top run films. There are films about artists and musicians and that kind of thing, and some how-to kinds of things, photography and visual art, that sort of thing. There are business films and career development films, so these can be added to or referred to if you're working with patrons who are interested in careers and job skills kinds of things. There are interviewing videos about interviewing and different parts of the job search process. You can also see that there are education films, and there are even some instructional films for different careers, including library and information management. So if you haven't had a chance to check those out, you may want to take a look and see. Some of them are they're very specific about particular topics that we might be interested in, or there are some more general things like conducting the reference interview, or there are some customer service kinds of options as well. So those are here and helpful for us to keep up with things that are relevant in the library world. There are links on the IT Wiki to marketing resources for all of these different e-content, in particular resources, digital resources, and we'll take a look at those in maybe toward the end if we have a little bit of time. I kind of put this little slide in here about if you lots of patrons, you can start with the app. But as I said earlier, for those who are used to using a desktop, it can often be easier if they go to the resource either through the WLS site or through your library website and set up their account there and then put the app on their device and sign in. So moving on to learning resources, we actually have, oh, I'm sorry, I want to point out one other thing before we move on, and that is that since we no longer have access to PressReader, you can point people in the direction of both Overdrive, Libby, and Hoopla, because those now have magazines. We don't have a resource for newspapers per se, the kinds of newspapers internationally that PressReader offered. So if you had patrons who use that, we are looking for a resource to replace that, but that's not necessarily available at this time as a digital resource. There's a question in the chat about WLS having marketing materials. Will WLS have marketing materials with basic instructions for patrons, or do we get graphics user guides from the vendors? Are the listen, read, and watch offerings on the WLS website up to date? The site, the WLS website for the public is up to date in terms of links to available resources. So everything that is available, everything that's linked off the WLS site is active and available. In terms of marketing materials, most of the marketing materials that are available are usually through the vendor. There are, I do have links to those. I'm going to go ahead and come back here. Wrong link. Sorry about that. Let me add a little. Let me open a new tab and go to the IT Wiki. If you go to the help and FAQ page at the very bottom of it, go ahead and talk about this now since the question came up. At the very bottom of that help and FAQ page is a link to, excuse me, where did mine go? Oh, to e-resource marketing resources. A lot of the times, the reason that we don't do our own marketing resources is because for many of the vendors like Hoopla and Overdrive, they're really making an effort to create marketing materials for libraries to use. And so we've been trying to highlight some of those through the digital dive emails that we send out most weeks. And it varies by vendor for sure. I think some of them are not as, like LinkedIn Learning doesn't have as many resources, but Hoopla has a ton of marketing options for that are topical, that are just, and that are also some basic kind of options as well. So if you wanted to go to their training resources, they have some videos as well as print options for getting started. So there are social media graphics and how-to guides, and you can use those for yourself, and also VFs. They have, and they're very much step-by-step kinds of things. The question came up, are there any potential new services in the pipeline? There, if you're talking about at WLS, every year the e-content committee meets and reviews potential services, either that are suggested by directors and that how they fit into the rest of the WLS offerings. So it's a continual basis, and those are reviewed and updated annually. So that if there are changes to services, sometimes we will make those changes at mid-year, or if a service offers a new option or new service, new content, we get those out as soon as they're available. But there's nothing, I'm not sure about other potential new services that you might be referring to. All right, so let me go ahead and we'll take a look at more of the, oops. All right, so let's go back to those learning resources. The Learning Upgrade app is an interactive reading app. It was introduced and there's a link to it on the WLS site there. But generally speaking, it's an app. It's available on iOS and Android, and it is for adult learners. There is a free week trial, and then after that, a person has to do a paid account. There, the WLS careers department, a job career department, they can make arrangements if somebody contacts them to help them set up an account so they can have access to a longer period of time. There are quizzes in addition to lessons there, so it's very accessible, and it's in English and Spanish. The LinkedIn Learning, going to kind of run through some of these things pretty quickly. We've got LinkedIn Learning, we've got tutor.com. Those are places where you can refer people who previously used the Learning Library, the Learning Express library, for many of the sort of practice test kinds of things. A lot of those are on tutor.com, and those are because tutor.com partnered with Princeton Review to make those tests available. Some of the resources that you may not be as aware of are University of Fashion, the drivingtest.org, and those two in particular are kind of niche things, but they are available to patrons. And the University of Fashion site actually gets a fair amount of use. It has how-to videos all the way from beginners really on up to some pretty complex kind of technique kind of things. And so it really has a lot to offer. In addition to links to design and fashion magazines and resources like that. So it's good for somebody who's interested in a fashion career or somebody who is interested in design as an adult, or and getting involved as a hobby or for a potential career. I wanted to mention the First Find site because it has a lot of options for not only learning actually, but for jobs and careers. So to help people build skills, it links to the WLS careers website and career coaches so that people can get help in that way with a live career coach. And they're building the First Find site to include more information about digital literacy and information literacy, so that it is more like a one-stop shop for people to go ahead and access a variety of different kinds of information. I mentioned LinkedIn Learning earlier. This is what used to be lynda.com. It has video tutorials, courses, and what they call learning paths. So for somebody who wants to become do programming, it'll set up different kinds of it'll create a learning path for them with suggested coursework in a particular order so that they can move on. There are also a lot of options in technology and the creative section. So there's lots of photography courses and animation courses, and as well as business skills and that kind of thing. You don't have to have a LinkedIn account to use it. I think that's really important for people to know. It uses your library card and PIN to log in, but a person can actually browse or search the catalog without logging in to get information. We have had a little bit occasionally, particularly in the switch over to the library card sign in, where people had trouble signing in and they would get an error message. And when that happens, or if that happens to anyone, if they clear their cache and then try to sign in again, they'll almost always be able to get in. If not, you can contact this contact WLS, the help desk, and we'll see what we can do. But I've had almost 100% success with clear the cache and log in again and being able to do that. I think that the tutor.com, the question is, does LinkedIn Learning offer feedback and certifications? LinkedIn Learning still offers certifications, but I am not aware of feedback per se. And I'm not aware of astronomy and foreign languages in LinkedIn Learning, but I'll do some more research about the breadth of offerings that are there. And I'll get some more information about that in the follow-up email. I think primarily it is technology and business and career oriented, but if they have some of these other options, I'll be actually very excited to learn about that. So tutor.com, I think that most of us are aware of it, that it is a live tutor website. The time frame for live tutors was expanded greatly because of the pandemic, and it's available, tutors are available from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. I believe it's 7 days a week. The tutors are vetted and they are experts in their field. So in addition to K through 12 topics, there are also career and business topics. So you can get help with particular job skills kinds of things. In addition to those live tutors, there are drop off and review options. So those can be for students with getting help with a math question or a report or essay, but also for an adult or a young person who is applying for a job, they can get a cover letter or resume review. They drop off and the return is usually 24 hours. And so they can get a live person to review and make suggestions about any of those documents that they are going to be using. The tutor.com Skills Center has practice items as well as practice tests, and some of those are downloadable. There are templates there and career advice. They also have links to other websites where some of those things are available if they don't have them right there for themselves. I just have sort of some getting started suggestions. Really, it's a matter of going to the website and logging in with your library card and PIN. There are some options. Some courses are available in Spanish. It's a more limited selection than the English courses, but they are expanding that all the time. And they also are expanding their training and help resources, both for library staff and for patrons. So there are many little webinars that they have that patrons can watch and to get information about what's available and the best ways to use tutor.com. Very briefly, we're running through this really quickly. The WLS eResearch, what we call eResearch tools and databases, there are not, I should say, most of the funding within WLS has gone toward content because that's where our patrons do the most use, and most of our patrons want those resources. It's also, WLS is not putting money toward those because New York State has novel, the novel databases, and those like Academic One File and eLibrary Elementary and the Gale resources, those are all free to New York State residents with their library cards or with their driver's licenses. One of the, or I should say, two of the resources that we do have are Tumble Book Library, and those are animated talking books, which I mentioned before. And then the Explain Patient Education Health tutorials, those are actually video tutorials. They are in simple language and they're clear format. They are on health topics. They're really geared toward helping a consumer learn about, maybe a diagnosis that they got or a health condition that a relative or friend has, and it'll give them information about that illness or condition, some medical tests, procedures, and that kind of thing. There is a Spanish language version of it as well. And so it's searchable and it brings up video in very clear, simple language. There's a lot of information here is linked through this presentation on the IT Wiki. And so in addition to each of the vendor help sites, there's more help on the IT Wiki, as I mentioned earlier, and we just sort of took a look. I've got the right thing here. Yep. There are marketing resources as well as a couple of other things. There's a list here of all the shared paid resources. Now, what this means is this is a list of the URLs that you would need to use on your website to get your patrons Westchester Library System access to any of these resources. I think most of us know that if a patron just Googles one of the resources, for the most part, they will need to, for a few of them, they can log in that way, but for many of them, they need to use the WLS particular URL. And there are a couple of them that actually list, there used to be a couple that would actually have a particular library's URL, but for the most part now they are all WLS links. So it's the same link and these can be copied and used on your websites. The other thing that we've got available, and I keep these relatively up to date for you, are there. So there's the presentation that you can go through slide by slide. I will be updating this printable version of it as well. There's a printable e-resources quick guide, and this is actually something that is here so that you can, if you want to, it's a half sheet option. And if you print them, front and back, 2 versions of it, you can have a list of the ebook resources, movies, e-audiobooks, magazines, and comics and music. So it's really meant to be just sort of a really brief handout, and this is a PDF version of it. If you were interested in being able to adapt this, you can go ahead and email me, and I will share the document with you so that you can make your own version of it if you'd like to do that. There's also a synopsis of the digital resources for staff. And this is a printable chart. We kind of looked at some versions of these. Also, this is the digital, these are the content options. And this would be, this has the borrowing models for people so that they know, so that staff can pretty easily help patrons know what's available to them, how many checkouts they have, how many holds they have, how many credits they have per month on streaming services, that kind of thing. There are some more details here as well, some patron support, email links, or sorry, web links. And then in some of the places like the content e-resources page there's a what's new option. So Overdrive has been creating lists of things for instance, juvenile Spanish language titles that are always available and free. So some of that news is here on the e-content page with a little bit more detail. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we've only got a couple minutes left, but I'm wondering if anybody has questions or comments. I'm going to open up the floor so that if anybody wants to get more information, they can do that. Is there anything that you expected to see here that you didn't see? And I guess my other question might be, is there a takeaway from this session, something new that you learned or something that you can think about implementing? All right. You can unmute yourself or put that in the chat. I think that for those of you who work with patrons on the front lines, I think in 2022, the biggest challenge for us is going to be helping Overdrive users to move to Libby, because I think anyone who's still using Overdrive is devoted. And so I know Overdrive is putting together resources to make that transition, and WLS will be at least passing those along, if not creating some assets for you guys to share with you guys as well. There's a question in the chat. Did we figure out if we can change Libby loans after they are borrowed? And I think if you mean the loan period, I don't believe that's possible, but I will confirm that in the follow-up email. All right. It is 3:01. I want to thank everyone for coming today. I'm going to stop recording.